July the 27th, 2022 Board for Licensing Contractors to order. I would like to ask each board member, if you're making a motion, to state your name before you make the motion so the recorder can get that into the record and understand you. We have an agenda. The first thing I'd like to do is entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Ronnie Tickle, approved.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the board meeting minutes from the May meeting, May the 24th. If I can get a motion to approve those minutes.
Randy Chase, second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. Now we'll get into the license reviews and approvals by the board. The hardships.
These have all been reviewed by board members and approved.
Into license approvals, the initial apps, revisions.
You are not allowed to unmute. To raise your hand, press *5.
LLEs and LLPs. Any initial apps? We've all been over all of these. I'll make a motion, or can I get a motion to approve the initial apps, the revisions, the LLEs, the LLPs, and the home improvements?
Motion, Ronnie Tickle.
Kenny Jones, second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Seeing none, the motion carries. Applications with factors and interviews. Do we have anyone with interviews?
I do. 77962. Classification asking for a BCA. Monetary limit 175,000. He did a home improvement job and asked for a fine of $250. When he pays that fine, go ahead and issue him his BCA license. He has some experience and good knowledge of building and being a good manager of being able to construct a house. Another one. 06 A&A construction remodeling home improvement with a felony. You could be lucky to explain what this is. It has to do with the first chance, the new chance of somebody.
Yes, sir. This is John Murphy, attorney for the board. The Fresh Start Act provides that the board can review a series of factors in order to determine the application. The board can review the relationship between the nature of the crime and the purpose of regulating the occupation, profession, business, or trade, the relationship between the crime and the ability, capacity, and fitness required to perform the duties and discharge the responsibilities of the occupation, profession, business, or trade, any evidence of rehabilitation or treatment undertaken that might mitigate the crime, and any applicable federal laws. So those are a series of factors pursuant to the Fresh Start Act that the board can consider when determining whether the license can be issued.
I have a motion to approve this, gentleman. he does meet the criteria that we need to go by. I had John, Stuart.
Hand raised.
I had Stuart meet with me when we met this gentleman, and I feel like that he'll be a good asset, and to go ahead and approve him for a home improvement license. That's all I have.
Other
Yeah,
interviews?
I've got two. This is Randy Chase. I had one, Thomas Warren, who he was trying to get approval to take the plumbing test to get a plumbing license, and we were sort of trying to figure out how he had any plumbing experience, because he's got a BCA. He's doing small renovation and additions in some rural counties. He didn't
Hand lowered. You are allowed to unmute. To unmute yourself, press star 6.
list any specific projects. I'm going to recommend
You are no longer
taking
muted.
the plumbing test or the LLP test, probably the LLP, and then we'll see sort of his experience at that time. So it's not really an application issue yet. So we got him squared away. The second interview I had was Thorpe Design, which is 78149. This is a sprinkler contractor that is licensed under the Fire Protection Sprinkler Systems Alarm Division or whatever, which is separate from our contractors deal. And he was doing mostly smaller projects in the, maximum $10,000 range, a lot of residential type work. Well, at some point he started doing work over $25,000, moved into sort of some commercial projects around Middle Tennessee. Thought that he was covered under his fire protection and alarm systems license, but then he started doing more and more of it, and it became apparent to him, it was brought to his attention, that he also needed a CMC-D license to do the actual piping work associated with the sprinkler system. Once he immediately understanding that, this happened in the last year or two, he applied for a CMC-D, got the license and everything, but he did numerous projects before he did that. Best I can tell, maybe 18. I'm recommending that we fine him $10,000 because there was a significant amount of work done in what I would say sort of a life safety kind of environment. So I think it needs to be a significant fine. I think it potentially could be more than that, but I think based on his credibility and coming forward, kind of telling us what he had done, we have no complaints on the guy. He seems like a very reputable contractor, and I think he'd be willing to pay that to get this behind him and move forward.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the applications with factors and interviews?
Kenny Jones, I make the motion.
Mark Rudd, I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. I want to back up just a minute to the interviews and cover file number 10538. It was an interview for a denial from the last meeting, and the applicant did not show for the interview, and I would like to make a motion that the board delay the interview until the next meeting to give the applicant time to appear before the board and introduce any changing information that might help in the approval of the license. That's a motion from the board chair, Keith Whittington.
Second, Ronnie Tickle.
Got a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. Now we've got a pre-licensed exam provider.
do we need to go over number 3 and number 4 on the list, interview list?
Number 3 and number 4 on the list, I approved both of those.
Okay, they're approved. Okay. So, the next item on the agenda is the contractor pre-licensed exam provider, and this application is from an organization called Contractor Training Center. And I looked at their application. Everything is in order. They already give several courses across the United States, and they paid their fee, so there'll be one. I think altogether this will make us having, I think around 6 pre-licensed contractor providers. So, but everything looked in order for that.
Okay, any questions about this exam provider? Can I get a motion to approve?
Mark Rudd, move for approval.
Kenny Jones, second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. Then we have
RCE provider on the next one, and this is one that's asking to provide continuing education for residential contractors. And with this one, this will give us 11 providers that can offer continuing education. At Home Prep, they're already approved as a BCAR class provider, and they're also a contractor pre-licensed exam provider. So we've looked at them in the past, and their application and everything to provide continuing education looks all in order.
okay, can I get a motion to approve?
Mark Rudd, I move for approval.
Jerry Hayes, I second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. Now we'll get into the legal report.
There are no changes to the legal report. Everything was approved as recommended.
Motion to approve the legal report.
Mark Rudd, I move for approval of the legal report.
I second Jerry
Second.
Hayes.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. Now the next one is something we talked about a little before the meeting. Let's get into the trust ownership and what we want to do about a policy.
Thank you, Chair. As we mentioned as we were wrapping up at the last meeting, the board received a couple of questions regarding the purchase or transfer of ownership of a contracting business to a trust. Specifically, whether this change in ownership to a trust would be considered a change in mode of operation pursuant to Tennessee Rules and Regs 0680-01-.09, and therefore requiring a written application to the board and obtaining a new license. Because the rule uses fairly broad language and provides that in the case of a merger, purchase by non-stockholders of a majority interest, reorganization due to bankruptcy, or any other change in mode of operation, a reasonable interpretation of this rule is that such a transfer of ownership changes the mode of operation of the business and subject to the catch-all phrasing stated in the rule. Therefore, pursuant to this rule, I would advise a licensee should reapply by written application and notice be provided to the board if and when the transfer of ownership of their entity is to a trust.
Discussion? something we need to opt as a policy?
I think the board could advise that this rule is implicated if there is a transfer to a trust, and would therefore any applications or any transfers of existing licenses to a trust would require a new license.
And a question I would have is, we are going to allow trusts to be owners of businesses. They just have to apply as a new licensee.
If they're correct, if it's if it's a new application, and the ownership is of a trust, I think pursuant to this review and this logic, it would follow that they would have to satisfy all of the license requirements, including the same types of requirements that we provide for corporations and other types of legal entities, such as a qualifying agent, financial statements, etc.
I think I was the one that reviewed this request, and that they wanted financial responsibility to be spread to the trust, but they did not want to allow decision-making spread to the trust. Is that something that we would allow?
I think that's something that the board could consider. I think when we reviewed this question, we were specifically looking at the legal entity that is either making an application or that the legal entity is changing to. In the context of a qualifying agent, the same way that there's a corporation that has a qualifying agent that is subject to being engaging in the practice of contracting, and is also has to file that paperwork. The question turned on who would be responsible for submitting that paperwork, and in the context of a trust, we would most likely consider it to be the trustee that has the legal responsibility to submit all of that paperwork and hold the legal responsibility to organize administrative oversight of the trust itself. So I think it would fall on the trustee, and the board could look at that when it's reviewing an application. Of course, I believe the rule, the way that it's contemplated, is because there's such a significant change in mode of operation that it would require the board's review and approval of that separate entity.
Our trust set up in proper word. Take any financial responsibilities.
A trust which owns an entity that's licensed by the board will more than likely be liable for civil penalties when a complaint has been made against that contracting license holder. Additionally, the beneficiaries of a trust in that distribution, depending on the facts and circumstances, a distribution of interest of a beneficiary is most likely liable to civil penalties based on the research that we conducted.
Do we need to here?
I think the board can make a motion that it is determined based on legal's review and recommendation that a change in mode of operation to a trust does implicate this rule and would require a new application.
Can I get a motion?
This is Mark Brudd. I'll make that motion.
Second.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
We have any other licensed contractors owned by trust?
Is this retroactive? Like, are we going to go back to all the license holders that are owned by trusts and make them fill out new applications at this time?
I'm more concerned with who are we going to hold accountable. I've heard of some most likely would be responsible, but who is responsible at the end of the day with the trust?
So I think based on the analysis, if we're reviewing the trust as a separate legal entity, the trustee, of course, is going to provide the administrative oversight of a trust. When a separate legal entity is making an application to the board, they do have to identify a qualifying agent that has written power of attorney that can bind the contracting entity legally. So in terms of reviewing a complaint, it would still be based on the same sets of factors. The decision making, the workmanship, all of the same types of factors that you would be analyzing if it was a corporate entity. Based on the initial review, of course.
We would hold the trust accountable, not the guy that wants to give it to the trust, but keep making the decisions.
I think it would be largely fact driven in that case. And if you're looking at applications for licensure, you could review that as part of the license review.
Sounds a little muddy to me.
Much different than a corporation or LLC. You're going to still have the owners listed on the application. The owners of the trust will be on there. They'll be signing the affidavit. So you'll have their names and their information. So we've been treating it in the past just like we would a corporation or LLC. Usually a trust is set up as a corporate entity as well. So
You're going to have that pay to fall back on as well. Have to, we can hire or qualify the QA.
you'll still have the very same information we do now with every application. So when a board member looks at it, he's going to see the owners and he's going to see the qualifying agent, their insurance. So everything's going to be pretty much backed up, just like it was, like we have it for corporate companies.
My only question is, so I'm a corporation.
Correct.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. The motion carries. Now we've got application rulemaking update. John?
Sir. At the previous meeting, I mentioned that the rules were still working their way through the process with the Attorney General's office. The rulemaking packet regarding the application approval process was approved by the Attorney General's office and submitted to the Secretary of State's office. The rules are effective 90 days from the date of filing, during which time the Joint Government Operations Committee of the General Assembly will schedule a hearing for consideration of the rules and any subsequent questions. Currently, the rules are on track for an effective date of September 21st.
Very good. Board updates. Carolyn?
I believe I emailed you all the budget information. I don't have any new financials since April, so these are still pretty much the same. No legislation that's been drafted so far. We did have 2 formal hearings since the last meeting, and the judge did grant the maximum civil penalty, so we're glad of that. And then as far as Go Build, they just met, I believe it was yesterday, and so they're waiting on their CPA for, I believe, for their final financial statement. They did provide a compilation, and I can send that to everyone just to have it, but we should know more about their organization, their current changes, and can give you a better update at the September meeting. And then maybe we can invite them in November and have them provide an update. And I believe that's all I have.
Any other business to come before the board? I've already. One thing I would like to say is, as board chairman, I appreciate our attorney, John Murphy. Today is his last meeting, and I'd like to see the board give him a good hand for his hard work, and best wishes for you in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other business come before the board? If not, we are adjourned.